Alright, so once again, if clauses versus wish sentences and wish clauses. Conditionals, basically. Now, we talked about conditionals. Now I want to have a look at the unconditionals. Now I want to have a look at the wish sentences. But first, a quick look at the conditionals. So, speaking of conditionals, first, second, third, fourth. That is 0, first, second, third, fourth. Some say we have 3 conditionals. Some say we have a 0 on first conditional. And then there's a 4th conditional. Well, let's take a look. If you go there, you see him, but you will see him. Or you might see him, or you may see him. If you boil water by 100 degrees, it boils, or it will boil. It boils. Grammar. Why? Natural fact. If you boil water by 100 degrees centigrade, it boils. But some people also say will boil. That's why 0 on first conditional, they're connected. But grammar books would say natural fact. Now, something I forgot to put here is the first conditional, which is like, if you go to that party, you will, or you see him. See John. You can say will, you can say may, you may see John. If you study hard, you may pass the test. You will pass the test. You can pass the test. You might. So we can use modals here. So when we talk about 0 conditional, basically it's about natural facts. If you boil water by 100 degrees centigrade, it boils. It's a natural fact. If you put metal in fire, it melts. Some metals. Depends on what degree of heat. It melts. If you put butter in your mouth, it melts. Some people would say will melt. Some grammar books say no, you can't say that because it's a natural fact. But some people say that. But first conditional would be, if you go to that party, not part, nobody's telling me this, part, not party. If you go to the party, you may see her. You may see him. Or you will see him. Or you can't see him. Modals. If I were you, second conditional, if I were you, or I was you, was, grammar says no, because it's not real, it's unreal. Grammar says you can't say I was, but conversationally you find a lot of native people who say if I was you. If I was you, I wouldn't do that. But if I were you, I didn't do that? I don't do that? No, I wouldn't. Because it's not real. I wouldn't even consider doing that. Consider doing, right? Remember, consider ing. I wouldn't even consider. I wouldn't even think about it. Perish the thought. If I were you, I wouldn't call him. He's a jerk. If I were him, if I were in your shoes, what would you do if you were in my shoes? What would you do if you were me? Yeah? What would you do if you were me? You see, in this sentence, there's no comma. But if I say, if I were you, I need a comma. What would you do if you were me? If I were you, I wouldn't call him. Or I wouldn't call him. What would you do if you were me? I wouldn't call him. Or I would call him. I would apologize. I would go over to his place. I would buy a gift. I would kiss him. I would Children. Come. Yeah? So, second condition. Third conditional, let's bring it down a bit. So, second condition. $1 million, have, what would you say, second conditional? Give me an example. Yeah, $1 million, you had, what, do?
If I have $1
If I?
have get,
You don't have it, so?
make,
If I had $1 million, I would?
and
What would you do if you had $1 million? Yeah? What would you do? Yeah, nothing, no comma. If you had $1 million, had $1 million. If I had $1 million, I would. What would I do if I had $1 million? I don't know. What would you do? So what would you do if you had $1 million? Don't you wish your girlfriend was hot like me? So, what would you do if you had a girlfriend like that? What would you do if you had a boyfriend like that? Yeah.
Marry him. No.
You'd marry him? What would you do if you had a boyfriend like Enrique Iglesias?
ISIS?
Enrique Iglesias.
He's gay.
Enrique, she doesn't know you and he thinks you're gay. And I'm sorry. Yeah.
Maybe I know, I just don't know the name.
Okay. I apologize. Yeah. So what would you do if you had? Yeah? Yeah. So what would you do if you had $1 million? What would you do if you were in Whistler right now?
snowboarding.
If I
If I was in Israel,
Mhm.
I do snowboarding.
I
would do snowboarding.
would snowboard.
I would snowboard.
So if I were in Whistler,
What?
Yeah.
okay, that's something that
Can I
will
say-
take us to the fourth conditional. Before even mentioning, if I were in Whistler
I were.
now,
I was.
yes, for the past 15 minutes, I've been talking about this was and were. This were,
Okay.
I, is not
Okay.
in grammar because it's not real. You should say I if I were. If I were you, not I was you. Thank you. Eureka! She found out. So, if I were you, if I was you, not grammar, but I was, right? But if I were you, because it's not real, according to grammar books. But people do say if I was. So if I were in Whistler, I'm not really sure if Whistler's put like this. Is there an H?
WHI.
H. So if I was in Whistler, if I were in Whistler right now, so I would snowboard, but I want to say right now, I'd be snowboarding, right? I'd be, that is, I would be snowboarding. So it's a mixed one, right? This gets a little complicated because some would say it's still 2, some say it's 4, but it's good to know the right tense to say that. So if I were you, I would call him. If I were in Whistler right now, I would be snowboarding. It means right now, I'd be snowboarding. Now let's go to the third one before. Third conditional, Julia. if you had called me, if you had told me earlier this morning, or if you had told me sooner, let's say. I help you. If you had told me sooner, had told me, so it's past participle, or, I'm sorry, the past perfect, simple present, if you had told me that before, if you had told me about that before, or sooner, I
would had helped you.
I
Would had helped you.
would had, can I say would had? Can I say would had?
Would had.
Have.
Yeah, there's no would had.
Have had.
Would have, right? I would have, should have, could have, would have helped you. So, had told, if you had told me sooner, if you had told me about your problem, I would have, could have helped you. I would have helped you, would have done something. If I had known about him before, I could have avoided the problem. I could have. If you had called me before you bought that thing, I could have. So could have, would have, should have. Yeah. If you had listened to your mother, this happened to you. This, if you had listened to your mother, like yesterday something bad happened to you. You got an accident.
Good.
So bad to say. Your mom said, don't go out like this, don't go with that car. The brakes don't function. If you had listened to your mother, you
Couldn't have.
wouldn't have got that accident. You wouldn't have gotten the accident. If you hadn't listened to your mom, you wouldn't have broken your leg. If you had listened to your mom, you didn't listen to your mom, but if you had listened to her, you wouldn't have broken your leg. If you had listened to me, you wouldn't have failed your test. You wouldn't have, if you had. So on the one hand we have this, had done something, on the one hand we have would have done something. Would or wouldn't. So if you had listened to me, had listened to me, you would have passed your test. If you had listened to me, you would have passed your test. If you had listened to me, you wouldn't have failed the test. Now, what is 4? 4 is a mixture of 1, 2, 2, 3, 2, 3, 3, 1. If there's a combination of any of these, it would be a 4. If I had listened to, if you had listened to me, if you had listened to me, we would not be, or we wouldn't be standing here for hours waiting for the store to open. Because I told you, the store will not open until 10. You said it's 7 o'clock, let's go. And it's now 7:15 and we're here. And we have to wait 2 hours. If you had listened to me, we wouldn't be waiting right now. We would not be standing here for hours in the rain. If you hadn't forgotten your umbrella, we wouldn't have been standing here, or we wouldn't be standing now for hours. There's a mixture. This fourth one is a little complicated. But the first 3 ones are quite simple. Pure and simple. The first 3 ones are pure and simple. The fourth one is a little complicated.
You use this in speaking for one. Using this?
Yeah, we use it all the time. We use all of them all the time. It's just that sometimes in spoken English, instead of saying if I were you, say if I was you. If I were you. But if I were you is a phrase that is so common. If I were you, I wouldn't do that. If I were in Whistler, I'd be snowboarding now. If I were you, I would kill him. You don't say if I am you, I will kill him. If I were you, because I'm not you. If I were you, I would kill him. If you go there, you will see him. If you don't study, you may fail the test. If you study hard, you will pass the test. If you study, you will pass. If you don't study, you will fail. Okay. So these are the if sentences once again. 4 conditionals, very easy. It's good to remember 3 or 4 simple sentences to actually try to form other sentences after them. After lunch, we'll have a look at the wish sentences very quickly. That's not a big deal. Okay? Thank you.